I do think we're going to have the coaching conversation a lot between now and the end of the year. Because
How can you not?
Yeah,
How
the
can you
last two
not have
games,
that
if you're Craig
conversation?
Berube, like they're talking about it in L.A., like how does Jim Hiller possibly survive that? How does
Yeah.
like they got pumped twice out of the break? Like Berube's
Yeah.
got to be thinking, man, I've been in the league a long time. This isn't great. Like they're not really picking up on my messaging right
The
now.
evidence is there, man. Listen, you don't want to kick a guy when he's down, clearly, but like with the way the team has performed, I think it's a valid conversation to have. It's just the team that you're talking about, Brian. I think like where you're talking about a bad year and it's just, hey, we'll show up next year and it might be different. It's the Florida Panthers. Like that team's been decimated by injuries, and it starts with Barkov. And at one point, they're having 8 or 9 regulars out of the lineup. All the guys that won cups are under contract. They're all coming back. Just this year's the bad year. They'll flip the switch next year and show up and be a good team. Can you honestly say that you have the same faith Toronto can do that?
It's a great point, Frankie. I could say no, but if I'm Keith Pelley, I think what you say is everybody's under evaluation. Like you have to look at the manager, you got to look at the coach, and you got to look at the roster construction and the players. And outside of a few guys that you have on term contracts that you want, again, the framework, that's when you start to go, okay, where do we go from here? And, I think in the next week you have to make some moves just for the sake of business, because you've got, it's roster management, it's asset management. But you have to decide who's driving the bus moving forward. If you have full confidence in Brad Treliving, then it's him that executes the plan. If you add to, we talked about Brendan Shanahan's role not getting filled. Maybe there is a scenario where you bring in more smart hockey people to help support the situation, because they have nothing but money and resources. Like MLSE's not cheap. That's the thing. They're not cheap, and they will spend the money for the best people. But all these decisions, these things have to be put in place here. Again, is the coach, like you brought up, Frankie, is the coach a guy who's they believe in?
By the way,
forward?
Very well-respected coach, right? Like you talk to guys that have played for him, they all love him. Very well-respected guy. No one's going to deny anything of that nature. It's just clear, like it just hasn't gone well on the ice this season. Maybe you get more than that, but maybe you get more runway than that. But that's just how it's looked so far.
And it's by no means saying the reason they're here is because of Berube. It's obviously deeper than that. Like the players haven't performed well enough. Management's got to own a lot of this too. Brad Treliving hasn't done a lot this year. He claimed Troy Stetcher. He fired Mark Savard. That's it. He's just let him play. And that may be because there's no options out there. I don't know what the reasoning is.
Well,
he'd have to give us that answer.
Too. Currency, Brian. Like we talk about it, they don't have a lot. Like if you want to be in on a player, the one thing I always hear, it's like, if Tree's in on this player X, player Y, what was he giving back? Like that's the thing. They don't. You've got a first in 2028.
Which you cannot trade.
Right,
like
and you've got Easton
You obviously
Cowan.
cannot trade.
You've got Easton Cowan. You've got Ben Danford. You've got, I think there has to be an overall, like, hey, you've got to restock the cupboards here. The Marlies, I pay attention to the Marlies quite
great.
a bit.
There's not a lot there. There might be a couple players who can play for you.
But at the end of the day, you look through the AHL, every team's got 3 or 4 prospects